What's good, everybody? It's Jeff Lightsy Jr. here with the Black Boss Channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. I have a special guest today, Mr. Roy Eavins. He is one of the leaders in broadcasting as far as HBCU Sports, HBCU Athletics. He is over the Jericho Broadcast Networks, the Black College Sports Network, and all its other subsidiaries. Mr. Roy Eavins, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Jeff. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good now, Mr. Evans. I want to ask you because HBCU sports and athletics is something that is now getting a bunch of attention, but this is a business that you've been in as far as giving the exposure that they deserve as far as the different historically black colleges and universities across the country, for decades now. Just talk to me about your start in getting in HBCU athletics, getting into, broadcasting some of their games and how your coverage expands beyond just like the basic football and basketball.
I started back in 1994, actually. I was graduating, getting out of Florida A&M University, and being a huge sports fan, just wanted to get more information about them. And, even living in Tallahassee, there was next to no coverage for FAMU unless there was something major that happened. And so me and my former roommate, college roommate, Roger Harris, decided to, look around and see if we were the only ones who really wanted that HBCU experience, man. We ended up surveying over like 1,000 people, and saw that back then it was still analog, so we were taking sheets of paper and writing everything down. And we realized that there seemed to be a good bit of people who wanted to get more information. And so out of that, we actually started the Black College Sports Network. It did start out based on being on television. We had a pretty good deal where we had negotiated some stuff with at the time the fledgling Fox Sports. We were going to do some things with one of the HBCUs, but the deal ended up falling through at the last minute, and it was kind of disappointing. And then we went into the situation where we were trying to get Comcast and Charter to actually give us a network. And we were like, listen, we'll do all the production, we'll do all the producing and everything. And their argument to me is that there wasn't enough of a demand for another, as they put it, black-owned station, and that there wouldn't be. Yeah, that was my thought
Wow.
process too, and it was
Wow.
just like, okay, very interesting. And at the time, I was actually working as a morning radio personality, and working as a radio. At that point, I was just a regular radio personality for Cox Clear Channel, and I started seeing all of the things that were happening with the internet that they were doing with our stations, and moving into the digital space and everything. And so I took about 6 months and did research. I was a history, African American studies major, so researching and things are easy for me, and just started looking at what was supposed to be happening with this whole internet thing. And just looked at it and was like, wow, this thing is going to be huge. Just believed that it was going to blow up. And so I started talking to my partner and co-founder Brian Fulford, and was like, look, dude, we can really do this stuff. So let's start off putting together a show. And out of that was born the BCSN Sports Rap. And this was, at this point, we're talking about 98. So, after a few years of just trying to pull everything together and working at it, we actually started the show in 98. From 98 to 2000, we had over 1,000 people a week downloading the 8 segments of the show to listen to them weekly. Now, here's the funny thing. That was prior to high-speed internet. So we actually had to break the show. We broke the show up into 15-minute segments that we put on a server. And back then it took 45 minutes to download each 15-minute segment of the show. And so, we just laid everything into it. And we were looking at it, just trying to stay ahead of the technology. In 2001, we actually got our first, let me see, September 11th, 2020. We were scheduled to meet with several companies actually the week following September 11th. And so, of course, when all of that happened, it just went through. Jeff, My laptop is about to go off because I forgot to plug it up this morning when I came
Oh,
in.
okay. Yeah, that's no, that's fine. I mean, it's just really cool to hear the origins of that story. It's really awesome to see that what you're doing is something that, I mean, it's innovative. At least let's go back to that time. It was super innovative. It was super original, super unique because, I mean, I can attest. I mean, there wasn't much coverage, and still not until recently,
Yeah.
of what was taking place in the SWAC, in the MEAC, in the different sports coverages. So you were saying, the last part of your story, you were saying that had a scheduled meeting after 9/11, but
Yeah,
then
the week,
obviously 9/11 took place.
right. I mean, and I'll never really, I'm sure that everyone else remembers exactly where they were when they heard about it. But I was actually sitting at the desk working on the proposal. We were going to be meeting with Darden Restaurants, which is the parent company for Red Lobster, Olive Garden, and all those folks, because we were headquartered in Orlando at the time, and they're also headquartered there.
Okay.
Excuse me. And of course, 9/11 happened. They ended up having to postpone that meeting because they had corporate offices in the Twin Towers. And so we put that back. That slowed us up a little bit. But what ended up happening after that was that we had the opportunity to meet with the athletic directors from the SWAC. And we ended up doing that. But hold on, let me get the first part first, because there's a
Okay.
gentleman named Robert Viles, who
Hmm.
at the time was the commissioner of the SIAC. And prior to working at the SIAC, he had actually been either with the University of Michigan or the Big Ten. He was somewhere in there. And I called him up because they were the closest conference to us, being out of Orlando, of course, them
Hmm.
being in Atlanta. And I said, hey, listen, I would really like to put your football and basketball games on a live stream on the internet. And he was just like, no. He's like, listen, I just came from the Big Ten. They're not gonna, they have not done anything that doesn't buffer, and it just didn't work well, and we just didn't want to do it. And so I said, listen, this is all I'm going to ask you to do. Just tune in and listen to our radio station, because we actually started our official full radio station in 2000.
Hmm.
The V108 The Vibe was the first part of the network when we were doing it. And so we started the radio station. It was a 24-hour urban music station. And so I sent him the link, emailed him over the link to the radio station, and he listened to the radios. He was like, okay, I'll check it out. And like 45 minutes later, I get this call back, and he was like, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He was like, I worked at the Big Ten or whatever for I don't know how many years, and they have been trying to do this, and we have never been able to do a broadcast that didn't buffer after 10 minutes. And he listened to our radio. He's like, I've been listening to your radio station for over half an hour, and you have yet to buffer once. I said, yeah, I told you that wasn't going to happen. We're ahead of the game and stuff. And he was just like, listen, you get up here to Atlanta, and we'll sign this contract, and we'll do this stuff. And so it was interesting because right before we were set to sign the contract, he got the job with the SWAC. And so we went in, and as he was doing that, that's where we get to the point where I was saying he asked me to come up. They were in Indianapolis, and for the NCAA meetings, but he gave me, he's like, listen, you got 30 minutes. You can talk to all of the ADs and tell them what you're trying to do, tell them what your plan is, and see what they say and everything, and then we'll go there. So I literally took 18 or 16-hour flight to do a 30-minute presentation. So I took 20 minutes to give what I wanted to say about actually I did 15 about what I wanted to say. And then I ended up leaving 10 minutes for them to talk. They proceeded to spend the next hour and a half trying to convince me that I wanted to do what I was asking them to do. So at that point, we got their contract as well. And it was the first time in history that two of the HBCU conferences had come together under one broadcast contract. And the first event that we did was the 2002 SWAC basketball championships. It was held in Birmingham. We drove up, did the games, broadcasted them. It was an audio only broadcast, of course, at that point. But it went well. And we came back and got set up. And then in the fall of that year, we started our broadcast for the SIAC on a weekly basis. And for 3 years, they were the only college conference in the country that had a free broadcast every week of a football and a basketball game.
Wow.
And then from there, we started working with some of the other schools and did some things. That went, like I said, for about 3 years. So we get to 2004 and we start testing out video. And we were able to kind of get that system perfected back then. And in 2005, we started doing our live video broadcast and just doing a lot of different things. At this point, the Black College Sports Network took a different structure on because there was so much more happening outside of the Black College sports pieces that we were doing, and people were seeing what we were doing with the sports and asked us to come on and help them with some other projects, put some of their things on television that had been, some of their things streaming that had been on like local access channel televisions and things of that nature. And so that's where the Jericho Broadcast Networks came out of. And so we kind of wrapped the Jericho Broadcast Networks around the Black College Sports Network. And, as we say, our goal is to change the world by changing the way that we as people of African descent see ourselves and starting to tell our own stories. Instead of letting other folks, dictate to us who we are. And so, we just continued to grow the product. And now we're here where we were then, 24 years later. We're doing live streaming for different organizations, different schools. Radio stations are getting in. We're actually preparing for a relaunch period. We'll start the soft part of the relaunch will actually kick off next month. And then the official soft launch will be in January. And then by the time we get to May, first or second quarter of 2022, we'll be launching a bunch of different shows and programs. And, that'll be the official relaunch. But we will have a lot of programming that people probably aren't even expecting from us. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. One thing we promote on here, once again, I'm talking to Roy Eavins of the Jericho Broadcast Networks, and an affiliate and also the parent company of the Black College Sports Network. But Roy, one thing we talk about here on this platform is growing Black-owned media, and to see, your journey over the last, 2.5 decades to get to where you're at now, and to have like something in the works by May of 2022 is just awesome. To hear that story, to hear that determination. You know what I'm saying? You said travel, all these hours for a 30-minute, presentation. All you knew you were guaranteed was 30 minutes, but that dedication, that determination has gotten you to where you're at now. I mean, that's just so awesome, man. I love to hear that kind of story. I wanna focus in on the Black College Sports Network for a second. Now, we've seen in the last, year and a half, maybe 2 years, the rise in HBCU athletics, specifically on, the basketball and the football courts. We've seen a lot of HBCUs do great when it comes to things like the NCAA tournament. We see the hiring of coaches like, Coach Deion Sanders, Coach Eddie George on the football field. Just, from your perspective, someone who's been in this game for a long time, right? And you've seen a lot of these, coaches come and go, and these programs go up and go down. What have you seen? What does the Black College, the HBCU sports landscape look like to you over the last few years?
It's interesting. For me, because I've always seen what other people are starting to see now. As it relates to it. And of course, there are others out there who've seen it and had the foresight to see what's going on. But I think they've just never even looked at the numbers, because literally for the past 30 years, the SIAC and the SWAC have both been consistently at the top of the attendance rankings for Division I and Division II football and basketball. So our fan base has always been there. We've always had the numbers. And of course, over the past 20 years and just in general sports, you've had the rise of now the FCS, which used to be Division I AA. Well, Division I AA used to be led by HBCU conferences, but now, you got a lot of other schools that have popped up, and they started playing football because people realize that football can make your university a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have resources that, of course, a lot of our universities don't have access to. So now they're doing this. But the difference is that you're dealing with these schools now who still only legitimately have one, maybe one and a half generation of a fan base. Well, we've been playing football for over 100 years. So we've got, great grandma was a fan of FAMU and
Mm-hmm.
of Jackson State and Tennessee State and all these other schools. So we've always had the ability to be profitable. What we've got to do is that we've got to realize that we are capable of doing things ourselves. And, one of the things that I say to the team is like, we're trying to convince people that we don't have to continue to take the crumbs that the mainstream media wants to give us when we can bake our own cakes.
Mm.
One of the arguments you talk about the Black College Sports Network that we say, I tell everybody, I said, let me explain something to you. ESPN3 is on the same internet that we're on. They don't have any special ESPN internet that they're on. It's the same exact one, that we're on. So we can give you what they're giving you as well. But it's more focused when it's coming from us, because wading through ESPN, whose job is to cover everybody, you got to find your way 3-4 levels down on their site to get to the HBCUs. Where on our site, it's front and center.
Yes.
And that's all that we cover. So.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're right about that. There ain't no special internet from ESPN that you can't get from the Black College Sports Network. I want to ask you about the exposure that seems to be taking place now. Are you a fan of like the high notoriety type coaches that are coming to some of these programs, like the Deion Sanders, like the Eddie Georges, and the exposure that they give to not just their individual schools, but to the Black college, the HBCU athletic scenes in general?
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22, and so you've got to take the good with the bad. My hope is, or my thought is, listen, and like I said, I was at Florida State around the time. I was at Florida A&M at the time Deion was at Florida State, and so I understand the celebrity that he brings, and that he exudes, and his charisma and all of that good stuff, which I think is amazing. The exposure that is now being given to the HBCU marketplace because Deion is now a part of that. But some of the things that Deion is saying is literally things that some of us have been saying for 20 plus years about the Black college sports landscape. So it's he's not reinventing the wheel, and again, he's a Florida State guy. I think we all understand that ultimately his goal is to get there. But as long as he does right by Jackson State while he is there and he gives them their attention, I am all for it. I am all for, the Eddie Georges. And I've actually been someone who has been an advocate of HBCUs hiring former NFL and NBA players. Now, that's one of the things in college HBCU basketball, they have been way ahead of the curve in hiring ex-professional athletes to come and coach at their universities. And I mean, one in particular, we had the contract for Clark Atlanta a few years ago, and they had Darrell Walker come in, and he took that program literally his first year to the championship. We were lucky enough to be able to follow him on that, and they followed that hiring with George Lynch, to do some different things. And so I think it's great. Like I said, my biggest desire is that these people treat our HBCUs with the reverence that they deserve. And shining a light on different things and doing it. But the reality is that, we can't, people can't get enamored with the celebrity and forget that they're people who've been, preaching these same things to you guys for years, about getting out and making some adjustments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Roy Evans of the Jericho Broadcast Networks, the Black College Sports Network. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. Now, Roy, that's interesting that you bring that up, because it's good in what Deion is doing down there at Jackson State and for the other conference. I mean, for the entire conference, the SWAC, and just HBCU athletics in general is really good. But like you said, I'm agreeing with you. I don't think it's something he's reinventing the wheel, but I do think his level of celebrity will continue to help the conference. Now, I'm right there, lock and said with you. I don't think it should have took Deion Sanders because there's generations of people that have graduated from those universities and that should, I think, been able to help move, progress and help those schools and those colleges move forward. Now, moving forward, how do you think now that Dion is at that school, as at one school, Eddie George is at one school, and I'm sure there'll be others that'll follow in those footsteps. Just what do you think the future of HBCU athletics looks like moving forward, as far as being able to compete with each other at a higher level, getting better facilities, more funding? How do you kind of see that shaping up if you had if you had to put your Miss Cleo hat on and and do some predicting for the future?
Well, I think one of the things that was already happening is the fact that there has to be a change in the mindset.
Mm.
You know, when I talked about the fact that we've got generations of fans, because we've been playing football for over 100 years, that can also be our issue, is that we have people in positions of leadership that don't necessarily understand or see how the technology can help them and how they can move forward with a lot of the things that are going on, just to be able to expand what they're doing. Like I said, it's to get people. Again, we were streaming, we were video live streaming before Facebook, before Spotify, before all of these services, and you would not believe how many of the administrators and people at the highest levels of the university did not understand what we were doing and didn't think that it would be beneficial to them. And so I think one of the best things that ever happened to HBCU sports was Dr. Charles McClellan in 2018 becoming the commissioner of the SWAC. And I say that for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that you have someone who in this past 20 years has been an athletic director at multiple programs. So he understands the challenges on an intimate level that the schools are facing. So as a commissioner, he can now address those. And then he's forward thinking. And I think those are some of the things that we have to start getting into. And I believe that Ms. McWilliams in the CIAA is someone who's in that same vein, that she's being able to do things that will help move it forward. So I think that's where the first part of it has to happen. It has to happen at the leadership level. And when I say leadership, I mean our presidents, our athletic directors have to be able to see that this technology is a tool that you can use to do things. The second part is we've got to start taking risk on ourselves. The schools, we have this idea that the old classic model, while the classic model itself is good and can still work, unless it's one of the major ones, the promoters really are no longer necessary, because the schools should be able to generate the funds that they need to do the things that they need to, and to go into these cities and negotiate the types of deals that they need to be able to put these games on. Ironically, just you talk about Deion, and he talked about recently that the money games are a problem. Well, I've been saying that again for 20 plus years, where we can make that kind of money over the long haul and not have our players beat up, not have our players done. I mean, because it's one thing to do those games in basketball, but when you're doing that in football, it's a completely different thing, because you're looking at the difference, and until this year, so to speak, and with the transfer portal being in, but you were looking for years, you're looking at 4 and 5 star players going against 1 and 2 and walk-ons, and people, when you're dealing with some of this stuff, and you're talking about the difference with a defensive lineman on the FBS side that is 300 plus pounds, and a 200 pound, offensive lineman at our level. So I just think that those are the types of things that we need to do. Our leadership has to become more forward thinking, on what they can do and looking at ways to do for ourselves. Not only that, the biggest part of it is that they've got to work collectively.
Mm.
I think we can change the entire. Let me change that. I don't think, I know that we can change the entire landscape of FCS sports if there was a conglomerate of the four, well, actually the five HBCU conferences and the independent HBCUs that are around the country that play sports. We could literally change everything. So that's what we need to do. We've got to become forward thinking and just really get out there and get more aggressive at building our own brands.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Roy, because the only difference between HBCUs and those at the Power Five level, in my opinion, and you can correct me if you think something different, is the funding and exposure. Right, the
Yeah.
money that goes into said Power Five program at a basketball level. If you go play basketball at Duke or Kentucky or North Carolina or Louisville or something like that, the only difference between those programs and a program like a Howard or Norfolk State, a Texas Southern or whatever, is that Duke Kentucky, Duke Kentucky, North Carolina, whatever, gets money. They got the Nike contracts. They play on ESPN. They do this, they do that, and that's why the 5-star kid that might be from Winston, North Carolina, decides to go to Duke instead of going to Winston-Salem State or something like that, right? Like that to me, that's the only difference. But what you're doing in broadcasting, the exposure that you give to those programs, and what we're trying to do here and try to give some of those programs, highlighting you and highlighting said schools or whatever, is to try to convince those students, those high level athletes that, hey, you can go to this HBCU and still get the same exposure, still get great competition, still have probably have an even better university experience, right?
Yeah.
Like have an even better university experience and still be able to go pro, right? Like that. That's
Right.
the thing. You can still go to the National Football League, go to the National Basketball Association, and do what you want to do at the same school and even have a better college experience. And so I think that is what's critical. I think that is what, essentially is the biggest difference. I want to get you out on this, Roy, and I don't want to keep you too long. Once again, I'm talking to Roy Eavins of the Jericho Broadcast Network, the Black College Sports Network. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. Now, Roy, like you talked about the future and the coming together. Is that something that you see? Because I'm talking about football. I've seen some big classics. I saw the Black College Sports Hall of Fame classic game that was huge. I saw the FAMU, the Southern Heritage Classic, the Orange Blossom Classic, some other great, the Tuskegee Airmen down there in Tuskegee, Alabama. I see some great classic football games, and those are bringing revenue. Those are getting exposure. Do you think that collaborative effort and those schools coming together to try to help each other get funding, get the players, get the exposure, is that something that you see coming? That's something that we want, but is that something that you see in the works and potentially happening in the very near future?
I do, but I am an optimist.
Mm-hmm.
I've always said that we as a people, we are our biggest challenge, but we're also our best hope.
Absolutely.
And so if we can just get the understanding and get into it, I believe that we will see that renaissance of the HBCU programs. I will, believe that we can look at it in a few years that we are dominating FCS competition, Division II competition, and making that consideration at that point of trying to move up to an FBS level.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take us doing, like we said, it's going to take the collaborative effort and being able to do some things. Because I think the biggest challenge, and this is, I'll say this when we talk about the comparisons of the FBS and the FCS schools.
Mm-hmm.
The real difference is the same thing that I talked about when we look at the HBCUs compared to the other FCS programs. It's the length of time that they've been doing it, which also speaks to their alumni base. Well, you've got Power Five and FBS schools who literally have stadiums that seat 100,000 people, 70, 80,000 people. And they've had those stadiums for 40, 50 years. Some of those schools literally have waiting lists to get on. They have waiting lists for the waiting list to be able to buy season tickets. So you've got a much larger fan base. So people, that's the economic piece that most people have to understand. That is what separates the Power Fives from the other schools. Now, what you've got to do is you even got to look at that internally, because you named a couple of schools. You talk about your Dukes. You talk about, schools of that size. I think schools like Duke show us that you can be competitive in maybe not all the sports, but you can be competitive at an extremely high level, but you've got to put the resources into it.
Absolutely.
And that's the other thing that our schools have to really start understanding, is that they can't look at athletics as a drain on the university. They have to start realizing that it is a way for people to grow the universities. Every school will tell you that's won a national championship in anything. The year after they win their national championship, applications usually increase by over 50%. Enrollment increases. Young kids like to go where winners are.
That's
And
absolutely.
even if they're going to be stuck in a lab all day, they want to be like, well, I went to that school and we won a championship. So I do see it happening. I do believe that we can do it, and I believe that we will do it. And of course, it's our plan and our hope that the Black College Sports Network and the Jericho Broadcast Network will be right at the forefront of pushing that agenda and bringing HBCUs to the masses.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Roy Evans of the Jericho Broadcast Network, of the Black College Sports Network. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. Now, Roy, I'll get you out on this. Where can the people find you? Where can people find the Jericho Broadcast Network? Where can they go and tap into
Okay.
some of the broadcasting of the Black College Sports Network, by the way?
All right. Well, you can. Our website is mybcsn.net. That is our broadcast site. It's mybcsn.net. Our corporate site is mybcsn.com. You can also get us on the Jericho side. It's myjbn.com is our site. Yep. And then you can get our app. We're on all the platforms. All you do is search myjbn hyphen mybcsn, and it'll bring it up, and you can follow all of our programming live directly through the app. All of that good stuff. Follow us on all social media, mybcsn and the number one. We're there. That's us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's where you can find us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Roy, I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to come speak with us, talk about the landscape of HBCU sports and all the great things happening over there at the Jericho Broadcast Network, the Black College Sports Network. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Peace.